It began on the evening of February 24th, 1978. 5 men from Yuba City, California, each with mild intellectual disabilities or mental health conditions, piled into a turquoise and white Mercury Montego and drove 50 miles north to Chico. They were excited. The UC Davis basketball team was playing, and the 5 friends were huge fans. Their names were Bill Sterling, Jack Hewitt, Ted Wire, Jack Madruga, and Gary Mathias. The game ended a little after 10 p.m. and the group left in high spirits. They even stopped at a convenience store nearby to grab some snacks: chocolate milk, a Hostess cherry pie, a couple of Pepsis, and a lemon pie. Then they got in the car and drove off into the night. They were expected back home that evening. The next morning, when none of them returned, their families knew immediately that something was wrong. These men weren't the type to disappear. They relied on routine. They needed structure. And they had something important coming up: a Special Olympics basketball tournament the next morning. They wouldn't miss it for anything. Days passed. Then, a week later, the first strange clue emerged. The group's Mercury Montego was found abandoned on a remote mountain road in the Plumas National Forest, 70 miles from Chico and miles off their expected route home. The car wasn't stuck. It had a quarter tank of gas, and the keys weren't inside. Yet, it had been neatly parked, as if someone had purposefully stopped there. There was no sign of damage or foul play. Even more confusing, none of the 5 men were dressed for the frigid, mountainous terrain, and none of their families could explain why they would have driven into the snowy wilderness, especially at night. Search parties combed the area for months with no results. Then, in June, 4 months later, a group of motorcyclists stumbled upon an old Forest Service trailer 20 miles away from where the car had been found. Inside, they discovered the body of Ted Wire. Ted had died lying on a mattress in the back room, wrapped in 8 military-style blankets. His beard suggested he'd survived for up to 13 weeks after the group disappeared. His feet were frostbitten, and he had lost between 80 to 100 pounds. Disturbingly, he had food available, but didn't eat it. There were dozens of C-ration cans nearby, many of which were never opened. A locker nearby had a ton of dehydrated food, more than enough to survive. The trailer had a propane tank too, but it had never been used to heat the space. In the woods nearby, searchers found the bodies of Jack Madruga and Bill Sterling, both badly decomposed. They had died from exposure just a few miles from the car. Their remains were scattered, possibly by animals, but showed no signs of trauma. 2 days later, just off the same road, they found Jack Hewitt's spine under some brush. His shoes and part of his body were eventually identified about a mile from the trailer. 4 of the 5 men were now accounted for. Only Gary Mathias, the one who didn't have an intellectual disability but struggled with schizophrenia, was never found. His shoes were discovered inside the trailer, next to Ted's body, which led investigators to believe Gary may have survived for a while inside the trailer with Ted. Perhaps he left to get help. But if so, why wasn't he ever found? No evidence of Gary's body, clothing, or belongings ever surfaced. To this day, no one knows what happened to him. Even more perplexing was how they'd ended up on that mountain in the first place. They had driven off course, into high altitude, in the middle of the night with no winter gear. None of the men had experience in the wilderness. Jack Madruga, who was very protective of his car, would have never willingly taken it up a snowy mountain road. And still, there was no sign the car had been forced off the road, no signs of damage, no broken glass, no tire tracks leading elsewhere. Theories swirled. Some believed they were chased. Others suspected Gary Mathias led them astray, intentionally or due to a mental health episode. There were even stories about a strange man they may have encountered that night in Chico. One witness said they saw a woman with a baby on that mountain road the same night, screaming for help. But that claim was never confirmed. Even now, decades later, we're left with a haunting mystery. 5 men vanished after a basketball game. 4 were found dead in remote wilderness. 1 was never found, and the circumstances suggest they could have survived, if only someone had used the supplies just inches away. Why did they leave the car? Why did they go up the mountain? Why didn't they use the food or heat in the trailer? And what happened to Gary? We may never know.